I'm Jason UFC, and today we have a story about Brendan Schaub says fighters should boycott UFC 300 to pressure Dana White others to reform judging. Brendan Schaub weighs in on the latest UFC controversy. Okay, let's try to get this pop up out of here. Okay, there we go. Former UFC heavyweight fighter Brendan Schaub feels it is time for fighters to take action to enact change to MMA's judging system. Kai Kara-France lost to Amir Abazi by split decision at UFC Fight Night event last weekend, despite many believing that Kai Kara-France deserved the win. Two of the judges scored the fight in favor of Amir Abazi. Many of Kai Kara-France's fighting colleagues have criticized the two judges, Sal Diamante and Chris Lee, for scoring the fight for Abazi. UFC middleweight champion Israel Adesanya went as far as to accuse some judges of ruining the livelihoods of athletes. Brendan Schaub, who picked up wins over Marco Krokop and Gabriel Gonzaga during his UFC and many others during his UFC career, fears it is up to fighters to bring the issue of controversial judging to the spotlight. Brendan Schaub, fighters should take action against questionable judging. Okay, let's see. During a recent episode of the Schaub Show, Brendan Schaub pitched an interesting way for judging to potentially change in MMA. Okay, let's see what Brendan Schaub has to say here. There has to be something we can do here, Schaub says. You can do what the SAG writers and just protest. What you do is rally the troops, do it before the big event, UFC 300. Okay, we're gonna have to talk about that in a few. The week of, guess what? Unless there's a change, we are not fighting. If the fighters decide to put their foot in the ground, 2 days and things would change. Okay, what? As of writing, UFC doesn't have an athlete-run union, although that could change amidst the ongoing fighter pay debate and other hot topics in the sport. Open scoring is another idea. I wouldn't say a solution, another idea that has been presented by some to combat head-scratching scorecards. Judges currently aren't required to reveal their perspective as to why they score specific fights the way they do. Now this is the point I wanted to talk about, because when we see the headline, it says UFC 300. I'm like, hold on, UFC 300? That's not happening until like next year, right? So you see, UFC 300 will take place next year and will likely be a massive event. I don't really know about that. I guess it's kind of arbitrary. Was UFC 200? Was that the Daniel Cormier, Anderson Silva, Amanda Nunes, Misha Tate in the yellow cage? Is that what UFC was? That Brock Lesnar and Mark Hunt? Is that UFC 200? Because that was a disaster, right? Like that was a disaster. That was an absolute disaster. Now, my only opinion of this story is that I was just like, when I saw the headline, I was just like, hold on, what is Brendan Schaub talking about? UFC 300, that happens next year. Why would we, protest a decision from this year next year? Like, if you really about that life, you would say that the fighters should just protest UFC 289, right? Isn't it the next event? UFC 300, that's like 11 pay-per-views from now. Is it 289? Is that this weekend? Yeah, it's 289. UFC 289 Canada, you would say, like, hey, if you really want to be about that life, we just had a bad decision. Let's protest that. But personally, I don't think that would be a good idea. I do not see UFC fighters protesting an entire event because another fighter lost on a close split decision. I saw the fight between Kai Kara-France and Amir Abazi. It was a close fight. I didn't think it was like completely egregious. to the point where you're just like, I can't take the sport. The sport is disgusting and judging is bad. It was, I could consider it kind of a bad decision, but like I said, it was a split decision. I would consider it more egregious if it was like a unanimous decision where you're just like, hold on, we got to call Vegas on these judges, right? Like, what fight would they watch? It was a split decision. Two judges scored it for one guy. One judge scored it for, so it's just like, how can we punish all judges if one scored it in your opinion of the fighter who won? And basically, it's always going to be your opinion, right? Like, it wasn't like if you go on necessarily Twitter and 100% of people were saying, oh yeah, no, Kai Kara fans clearly won that fight. It's maybe 60-40, 55 45, a decision. I didn't think it was that egregious that, that I would tell fighters, to wait until UFC 300 to protest judging. We've had other bad judging decisions this year. We've had bad UFC fighter performances. We've had bad referee. There's if we fix judging, then we're going to talk about referees. If we fix referees, then we're going to talk about fighters laying. It's always going to be something. Like I said, I didn't think it was that egregious that we have to like really put our foot down and go to the point of like actually protesting a UFC pay-per-view. But let me know your opinion of this story. Like I said, if I don't necessarily disagree with Brendan Schaub in this, but my only thing is that if he was, if he meant it, like why pick an arbitrary number like UFC 300? I know it's going to be a big event, yada yada, 400, 500, all that stuff is big events because it's like UFC, 100, whatever. But if you really, 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 really mean that, you would say, hey, right, like, we should protest the next event. The next event, UFC 289, that's where you put your foot down. But I wouldn't recommend that because, like I said, I don't think, other MMA fighters are going to protest event because of a split decision, right? Like, I really don't see fighters who, barely fight 3 times a year getting, 25-25 or 50-50, really putting down their paycheck because of one split decision, right? But let me know your opinion of this story. I'm Jason, UFC. Today we had a story about Brendan Schaub says UFC fighters should boycott UFC pay-per-view 300 next year to pressure Dana White others to reform judging. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.